Welcome again to the R4D series. Like mentioned before, I have always been an advocate for research and education, and I thought, why don't I share some of the researches that I read from time to time? These research reports are usually long, and I know that it can be sometimes very demanding for teachers or even for leaders to go through long pages of research. So I thought just to put them down within a video, within a very short presentation, for everyone to benefit from. You can share them with anyone you think who is interested. And I chose R4D to relate to R&D, which we all know, the term for research and development. And I have always noticed that research and development, unfortunately, is still absent in so many education systems and institutions in the world. And I think that if we truly thoughtfully try to relate research and development to our practices, it can be very helpful. However, it is imperative that I mention a quick disclaimer. For point number one is that I am sharing here global research findings that we can all benefit from. So these are not my own researches. Another point is the inquiry, because the target here is to drive inquiry in our school systems, nothing more than that. Point number three is limitations, because we have to always consider that there are limitations and we have to take them into consideration, such as the country, the education system involved, the timelines, organizations, conducting the research itself, all the conditions. So we have to mention that, or at least to consider that when we do our presentation. So, which means that this will be related to a certain country, but we can always benefit from it. Point number four is the ethical codes, or the ethics. It's very important and it's paramount. So please note that the elements that we must take into consideration here, such as objectivity, correct information, and respect to parties involved, to participants in the research involved, compliance to laws, and all those important points. And point number five is naturally related to point number four, which is research citation. Citation is extremely important, and I will always include it in the presentation and in the description below. So you are always encouraged to check the link and the citation and read the report for more information, because this is only a very short part of the report within the presentation, because sometimes it takes too long to make to do a presentation based on a report. So starting first with the overview, the research publisher is Learning Policy Institute, the LPI, and the Wallace Foundation. The title of the publication is Developing Effective Principles, What Kind of Learning Matters? The number of pages, 114 pages. This research was published in May 2022. The research tool used mainly was a synthesis of literature and surveys from 2000 through 2021, and the involved groups are naturally the principals representing elementary and secondary. The theme here is principal preparation, the development programs, the relationship to the principal, to the outcomes, student outcomes, teacher outcomes. And the target is mainly to understand the evidence regarding high quality principal learning. So this is a very quick image of the table of contents. As you can see, it's a very long report, but it is extremely helpful to go through if you have time. So the potential questions, as always, how can findings, or these results from the study inspire us in schools? And first, we start with what is high-level principal leadership. And this is very important, because sometimes we take the word leadership for granted and we simply think that leadership is simply running a school. Well, it is definitely more than that. And unfortunately, the term leadership has been taken for granted in the past few years. And the research proved that principals are critical school level factor when it comes mainly to students, first with the student outcomes. And what is meant by student outcomes is mainly the student achievement, the graduation rates, and also the attendance and absence rates, including, for example, and also tardiness. The second main factor that can be shown when there is high level of principal leadership is the positive teacher outcomes, and by that they can really, or they could really see the effect and the positive working conditions that the leaders created in their school, having those collaborative, supportive learning environments when you had those teachers and teachers' teams supporting each other. And one other very important factor, which is the attracting and retaining the staff, especially when it comes to teachers, developing their skills across their path and across their journey within the same school. And a third important factor proven by the research was the positive overall environment within the school. So we are talking here about systems. We are talking about systems levels. So this is when the leadership is able to create this very positive direction, this very clear path of the vision and the mission statements, the objectives as well, and the values in the school, when they can have those thoughtful, productive, fruitful conversations that are taken into one direction, when there is this positive and supportive conversation between leadership and teachers, teachers and learners, and of course, all the other stakeholders within the school. So what we can simplify this is the climate and culture within the school. So the method here in the research was objective driven. And like mentioned before, there were certain objectives, particularly 3 objectives, and the method was planned accordingly. So the first objective was mainly to understand the evidence regarding high quality principal learning. And like mentioned, there was this comprehensive review of literature from 2000 through 2021 that addressed those features of the pre-service and in-service learning programs and the outcomes of these programs. So the research approached this review very specifically. They identified certain terms, including also the inclusion criteria, and throughout that study, and they evaluated all the rigorous study and the tools that have been used throughout. And for example, I remember they have conducted, or they have identified 1,400 articles for the mainly related to inclusion. Only 104 met the criteria. The second objective was to understand the extent to which these principals can access this high quality principal learning and learning opportunities. And this is very important. And here they analyzed principal survey data from all through the elementary school principals and secondary school principals nationwide in the United States. And so it was a kind of a large scale data study, and it reflected the experiences of those principals, mainly related to their access to a pre-service and in-service learning opportunities. And the third one is the understanding the role of the state policies, federal and state policies, in shaping principal learning. And this is very critical here. Here, I think they identified 170 articles, books and chapters, and also reports. And this is very important because here they could highlight the relationship between the policies and between the design and the implementation on the ground of those learning opportunities. So again here, if we want to dig deeper, we can consider or think about the tools. So like mentioned, there was a literature synthesis methodology here. So they took the peer-reviewed journals of starting from 2002 to 2021, and mainly in K-12 public schools. So here we can say that this is the first step. They are defining the scope of the search, and this is very important. And the second one was gathering and screening the sources, because this is also important. And here they used the ProQuest Summon and Google Scholar, and they identified, or they did screening for 1,380 articles based on specific criteria, with their full text, with the reference lists. And what they did, which was very interesting, just like any study, they excluded all the irrelevant material and they funneled it down, and that was very helpful. And the third part here is the analysis and synthesis of the literature. And here, when the team members came together, they were coding all the articles, they were capturing the methods and the research design, and they were studying all the program details or the context material, along with the other findings. So they were adding all the main findings and the ancillary also findings, and assessing the methodological rigor. And this is very powerful when you do your studies. And this is interesting here when they use this figure to visualize the theory of action for professional learning of principles. And if we break it down, if we look at this, at the leader knowledge, skills, and behaviors, and this particularly involves all the different instructional support, the development of people, the focus on equity, management of change, all the skills that he had or that she had within the preparation for principalship. So this is all beyond the formal training. And the second, of course, is the leaders' lived experiences, because these leaders have been teachers before, have been students even before. So they have their identity, they have the education experience, and they had gone through relationships, and that all would come and provide some very good insights. And the third part, which they visualized, was the preparation and professional development. And of course, here we mean the instructional support, the school improvement, and all the school outcomes. So you are putting these together along with the professional pathway here, which is starting first as a teacher, and then as a teacher leader, and then assistant principal, novice principal, experienced principal. We know that in this kind of pathway, there are experiences and skills being added gradually and effectively, which will definitely help. And on top of that, they noticed and they learned that this is how all the below categories have been contributing to the teacher and student outcomes. And they learned that with the teacher practices and retention, school climate, student opportunities, and learning, when these are coming all together, they will definitely project on the skills of and the outcomes of the principal and the principal learning. So the first finding was the positive outcomes, and that was very important because this is the main reason why principals are there in the first place. We all know that. And what the finding was, exactly as stated, high quality principal preparation and professional development programs are associated with positive principal, teacher, and student outcomes, ranging from principals' feelings of preparedness and engagement in more effective practices to stronger teacher retention and improved student achievement. And here, this is very interesting because here you will see the relation, that there's a cause and an effect. So when the leaders felt that they were prepared and they had the effective practices, this automatically created the teacher retention and improved student achievement. And that was really important, although the research still mentioned that there wasn't enough. Sometimes there were some limitations in the research here when it comes to duration of the period of time observed, or the controls, inadequate controls as well, and sometimes the comparison groups. And we know this is part of most of the researches. Now, the second positive finding was the equity-oriented leadership. And by this, which means mainly how to attend to the diversity of learners. So and it was particularly stated, an equity-oriented leadership has the potential to develop aspiring principles, knowledge, and skills for meeting the needs of diverse learners. And this is very important because when you are putting together, and this is what the research concluded, when you're putting together those applied learning opportunities and the reflective projects that have been worked on, and by that we mean whatever interviews, cross-cultural interviews, any projects being done, any analytic journals as well, all those will aspire principals to deepen their understanding of the community they are in. They will understand the race, the language, the society structure as well, this built up. And all this will manifest later in schools, and how principals can work towards solving problems that might come out of all of this very social emotional factor. So, and the third finding was learning opportunities. And this particularly mentioned the pre-service and in-service learning opportunities, because these, they involve a great portion of the preparation of the principal to be in the workplace and whatever the tasks, and be accountable for everything that is requested in a very professional way. So the research states access to pre-service and in-service learning opportunities covering important content has been increasing for principals and is now widely available. But here, of course, they mentioned that there is this access to job-based learning opportunities, and they mean by that the internships and applied learning, mentoring, coaching skills, they weren't much available, they weren't much evident, and this creates some kind of lack of balance, which I think should be attended to. And the fourth one, the fourth outcome, inequity and inequality in learning opportunities, and this mainly states that the access to high quality learning opportunities varies across the states by school poverty level, reflecting differences in state policies. And this is quite understandable because we know the differences within a certain society, within a certain society structure, and this will definitely dictate how things can be implemented and the effectiveness of those practices. So most principals reported that they wanted some more professional development in mostly all the topics, but they said that there is always this lack of or obstacles and lack of opportunities to learn in all across the country, which includes mainly the time as a factor, and also budget-wise when we talk about money supporting those programs. And the last finding is the supportive policies. And again, this is very critical. We all know that policies policies need to support high quality principal learning programs. And in the research, it mentions that these policies can make a difference in states and districts that have overhauled standards and have used them to inform preparation, clinically rich learning opportunities and assessment. Evidence suggests that the quality of principal learning has improved. And this is very important because when you have certain standards, they will definitely dictate better practices. So here, it was important to mention in the report that when you have this high level of supervision, of follow-up, of assessment systems, then you will definitely have better performance projected on the ground of the schools. So there must have been some policies that could probably create some type of accreditation for the programs, partnerships with universities, and so on, so that there will be close monitoring and the right evaluation. So what were the major themes? First, what principals learn and how principals learn. And this is very important. And I personally find this very, very important because when you are thinking about the professional learning experiences and opportunities, you have to attend to the content. And this is what was stated in the report. You have to attend the content of the learning, which means what principals learn, how to lead the instruction, how to create this collegial social environments, how to evaluate the teachers and how they learn. And this means the structure that supports learning and all the pedagogies involved and how you can try to translate all the efforts, all the hands-on experiences done to outcomes that can be seen and can be celebrated as well. And it's interesting, just like in every R4D presentation, I include here some of the quotations from the research itself, because when they are better stated by the people themselves, it can better be reached. And this is very interesting here. For example, some of the quotations from report. Achievement gains in reading and mathematics were associated with more favorable school conditions reported on principal surveys. Gains in reading were associated with higher ratings of teacher capacity. Gains in math were associated with time spent on instructional leadership, as well as more favorable ratings of strategies and actions taken by the district or charter management organization. And first quote. Another quote, I used to think that the core work was about managing people in a school. Now I think it's about ensuring that there is a transformation. In order to do that, principals have to make sure that everyone is learning and engaging in the transformation. And second quote. For me, I think this group has been important because I do not feel isolated. Before, I felt like I was practicing in isolation because you are at your own school and you have all these issues that arise and issues that you do not really talk to your teachers about. So it was nice to have a sounding board, being able to talk and share experiences with people who were facing similar issues, where we were eventually able to problem solve around those issues together. End of third quote. And another quote, I learned the importance of following up with a discussion about the walkthrough, especially with new teachers or teachers with whom you were concerned. I learned that I should concentrate on the strengths of the teacher and be careful of how you address the areas in which the teacher might need further professional development. I learned that in order for the teacher to really receive and act on feedback given, the way in which you give that feedback is so very important. I learned that being specific, so to what was observed is critical, and that in delivering the message, it's a good idea to do it in person. I learned that it's important to use the proper observation format. I also learned that when delivering feedback, you should be as specific as possible. And this is the third or the fourth quote. The last quote, we looked at student work samples, we looked at the students' grades, and we looked at the types of books that the students were being assigned to read in class and the types of tasks they were being assigned. So it was a holistic way of looking at the multiple forms of data. It was much broader than what we've done in the past, end quote. And I personally found those 5 quotations very powerful. I'm sure if you check the link of the report itself and read the entire report, you will find much more of this invaluable information spoken by practitioners, by the principals themselves, and this is very important. This is the end of the research findings. I hope you find this helpful, developing effective principles, what kind of learning matters. Now, what matters to us now throughout this presentation, how can such findings inspire us? And first, what are those inquiries in our schools? If we try to sum up, we can easily conclude that when we have effective leadership, we will definitely have positive outcomes, learning opportunities, continuous learning opportunities, and supportive policies as well, because these will be all interrelated. So the questions that we can ask, which of the 3 is or are evident in our schools? Did we have access as principals to pre-service and in-service learning opportunities? Are we as leaders undertaking applied learning opportunities and reflective projects? And to what extent do we have the courage to request those learning opportunities within ample timeframes? Because we know we always find it difficult to manage our tasks and responsibilities in the school as principals and have this continuous development programs. And the last question, which we can ask, to what extent are programs and professional development well structured and implemented? And I think this is very important because most of the time, the training that takes place is not related to this school in particular. So most of the time we are centralizing, and when we centralize, it is not always helpful. We need to have some personalized development programs, and this doesn't always happen, unfortunately. And of course, we have more questions here, which we can always ask, and I leave this to you as principals, as also learning communities, to think about them. So what are or what is the driving conclusion question that we can take away from this presentation? Are we as principals and policies as well, policymakers, considering these criteria, the positive outcomes that result from effective leadership, the continuous learning opportunities that are needed for effective leadership, and the supportive policies that will push effective leadership forward? So this is a very important question which we all as communities have to really ponder. And I just end this with a very quick quote of myself. I think research may not solve all concerns, but it can drive reflection and action. To solve issues at grassroots level, transparency must come first, reflection must come second, and that's when conscious actions can confidently step in. I think there is no perfect research, there is no perfect study, there is no perfect practice, there is no perfect school. We are always working to progress and to discover new pathways, because we cannot remain still stagnant in our own pond without creating new pathways for us all as a community. So let's stay in orbit and let's develop and grow. If you find this interesting, please share it with some principals, with educators who are interested as well in research. And I really urge everyone to, when we do our practices, if we can find research-based information that can help us move forward instead of haphazardly selecting practices, because this also requests time, and learning from others' experiences is always very helpful. Thank you so much, and let's stay in orbit. Let's develop and grow.